Aloha! Aloha! Good morning. All right, must be something going on here. General Brown, there's more people here this morning than we're here to listen to you talk. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure at all what that means. Welcome to day 2 of the 2019 LANPAC. We are very, very excited that you're all here. We hope you had a great evening in Waikiki. Rumor has it that there was some pretty serious 4-star fitness going on in the fitness center this morning, led by our next keynote speaker. So I think there's some missing chairs because I think General Abrams injured some folks this morning by leading them through PT. A special thanks this morning to Lockheed Martin for sponsoring our registration and for KBR for sponsoring breakfast this morning. How about a round of applause for our great sponsors? Okay, I need your help. We talked yesterday a little bit about one of the ways that we're able to put on great events like this in support of U.S. Army Pacific and everyone out here in the Indo-Pacific region is through your membership. And so we had a nice turnout for folks joining the association yesterday. If you haven't done so, we encourage you to do so. It's less than $2 a month. Even General Brown can afford that. Which is a good thing. So stop by, see Christine Lathrop at the registration desk. They'll get you sorted out. And if you are already a member, thank you for that, for your membership. But please stop by the desk and make sure that we've got your updated membership information. Sometimes in the United States Army, we ask people to relocate. Doesn't happen very often, but every now and then we ask people in the Army to move duty assignments. We want to make sure we've got your correct contact information, your correct rank. I think General Brown is still listed as Major Brown, I think. So we want to make sure you do. So please, if you are a member, please stop by and update your information. If you're not a member, please consider joining us. We need your membership. We need your strength in order to put on great events like this. Well, we had a great day yesterday. Day 1, we had some great speakers, great panels, and we talked a lot about kind of the environment in which we're operating here in the Indo-Pacific. We talked about relationships. We didn't talk much yesterday about Korea. And those of you who've been coming to LANPAC for a couple of years will remember, particularly in 2017, it was Korea, 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 Korea. Korea is still important, all right? Singled out in the National Defense Strategy. Certainly one of America's strongest allies is the Republic of Korea. General So is here. Sir, we're very honored that you have joined us, the Chief of the Republic of Korea Army. Thank you, sir, for joining us here today. And unless you've been asleep for the past couple of years, you know that there is still an imminent threat posed in many different manners from North Korea to us, to our allies and friends, and to the region. So who better to speak to us this morning than the commander in Korea? He wears many hats, as you know. I would tell you, and you've got his biography, so we won't go through a lot of that, other than to remind you that we say often, that the Army is a family business. And I would tell you that there's probably no more family for whom the Army has been a business and a tradition than the Abrams family. Our speaker's father was the 26th Chief of Staff of the Army, remembered for many things, but one of his quotes that has endured over many, many years: people are not in the Army, people are the Army. And that is exemplified by his son, who now commands in Korea. An extraordinary career, graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. He, however, did not do particularly well academically at West Point, and he didn't rank sufficiently high to choose infantry as his branch of choice. So he got ranked into the armored cavalry, where he is. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Robert Abe Abrams.
Hey, thanks, sir. You know, that's the thing about West Point. Your school record is actually public knowledge. But it's all true. Aloha. Aloha. Okay, that was good. Let's try this one. Jonathan Imni Da Anyashamika. Got to be able to do it in multiple languages. Well, good morning. I want to thank General Ham and AUSA for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you on our alliance and activities in the Republic of Korea. And I also want to thank AUSA for hosting this forum, and I want to thank Bob Brown and the USARPAC team for co-hosting and all the great support. The conference staff and organizers, General Swan was telling me beforehand, this is our 7th year here, but this is my first opportunity to attend LANPAC, and I know that it is a first-rate event each year. And how do I know that? Because, at least for the last few years, right about this time, every single year without fail, my Twitter feed is bombarded with pictures of all the new technology, the cool swag, and of course, the executive time down by the beach. So this year, it is my turn to be in Hawaii. And as a matter of fact, for those of you who've got meetings scheduled with me this afternoon, I'll be doing them down by the pool. Now, I'm particularly interested in attending this year because many of the panels and forums are directly related to our forward-postured combat-credible force in Northeast Asia. And this morning, I'm going to touch on a number of those topics as they relate to Korea. And I'll focus my remarks on our unique and enduring alliance with the Republic of Korea. Now, I'm the 4th Abrams boy to serve in Korea. My family's history with Northeast Asia dates back to my father's service in the waning days of the Korean War, 1953 to 1954, stretches through my oldest brother, who served as a lieutenant on the DMZ, 62 to 63, my brother John, who served as the 2ID commander from 93 to 95. And it is, in fact, the greatest honor of my life to be the commander of United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and United States Forces Korea. And this is all to say that I have a deep and abiding personal investment in the stability and security of the Korean Peninsula and a strong connection to the people of Korea, our longstanding ally. Now, LANPAC's theme today is strengthening and building alliances and partnerships. And later today, the Indo-PACOM Commander, Admiral Phil Davidson, is going to provide the Indo-PACOM perspective on growing our relationships across the Indo-Pacific. This morning, however, I'm going to drill down on one particular relationship, an alliance which is over 65 years old, but continues to serve as a bulwark against tyranny, even as it evolves and transforms to meet emergent threats in the region. And I'm speaking, of course, about the alliance between the Republic of Korea and the United States. And I'll give you my thoughts on the current state of our alliance and how it contributes to the free and open Pacific that we are all deeply invested in maintaining. So let me begin with the bottom line up front. The ROK-US alliance is strong. We refer to it as ironclad. In fact, I can confidently stand before you this morning and state that the alliance remains not just ironclad, but stronger and more ready than ever. In my role as Commander of Combined Forces Command, I get the opportunity to work with and alongside phenomenal senior leaders and dedicated professionals of the Republic of Korea Armed Forces. Leaders like General Suh, down here, the new in-position Chief of Staff of the ROK Army, and many, many others. Together, we work each day to deter aggression, to maintain the readiness and combined defense posture necessary to defend the United States and the Republic of Korea. And if necessary, defeat any adversary who threatens our national interests of sovereignty, stability, and security. We use this term ironclad to describe the unbreakable and enduring nature of our alliance across the decades. The roots of our union, they run deep and they anchor us in common purpose. Forged in the crucible of ground combat, our strength is made up of three long-standing and abiding elements: shared sacrifice, core values, and demonstrated commitment. First and foremost, the alliance is founded on shared sacrifice. The Republic of Korea and the United States, along with 15 other United Nations sending states, sacrificed its sons and daughters for the cause of freedom. The Korean Peninsula, as many of you know, is an inhospitable environment for war. Sheer mountains, narrow valleys, numerous rivers divide the landmass and challenge the flow of men and material. The summers are oppressively hot, and the winters are bitterly cold. Over the course of 3 long years, United Nations forces traded body blows with the North Koreans and the Chinese People's Volunteer Army. In July of 1953, the armistice agreement was signed, but not before 36,000 American and 137,000 South Korean soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines had laid down their lives. Additionally, oftentimes this is a footnote, the nation of South Korea was decimated in that conflict. Nearly 400,000 Korean civilians were lost to the war's violence, and Seoul, an ancient hub of culture and commerce, was reduced to rubble and populated with over 1 million refugees, displaced persons seeking shelter, security, and looking to rebuild their shattered lives in this war-torn nation. The security and freedom of the Republic of Korea, in place since the signing of the armistice agreement, has also come at great cost. It's been hard-won through generations of continued sacrifice, selfless patriotism by those who have committed themselves to a greater cause and at times have paid the ultimate price. Since 27 July 1953, 62 Americans and over 300 South Koreans have lost their lives to the ongoing mission of deterrence and defense. Secondly, our alliance is about core values. Values that endure beyond generational and political change. They are foundational to human enterprise and social resilience. And they are the core of the post-World War international system upon which the great global economic expansion of the 20th century was built. Our values are founded on self-determination, respect for sovereignty, the rule of law, and rooted in the freedoms that we all hold dear. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom from persecution or coercion. Empowering individuals to achieve their potential, along with the catalyst of free enterprise. It fueled one of the most remarkable stories of national economic rise in the post-war era. Now think about this. In 1960, that same war-torn South Korea's GDP per capita was less than $200. The nation was reliant on foreign aid. In fact, in 1960, South Korea was economically among the worst performing nations in the world. The miracle on the Han, as we refer to it, that which is the modern vibrant city of Seoul that I know and have grown to love, an extension of the Republic of Korea as a whole. That miracle came about as the result of hard work, determination, and the same indomitable spirit I see reflected in our Korean military teammates. Building slowly at first and then riding the wave of global investment, innovation, and market expansion, South Korea has now raced past its regional peers to become the 4th largest economy in Asia and the 11th largest in the world. At the beginning of this decade, think about this now, the Republic of Korea became the 7th nation, only the 7th nation in the world to achieve a GDP per capita income of over $30,000. These facts are reflected in the Seoul skyline, which boasts the names of global companies responsible for many of the world's most innovative and most popular products. The freedoms that comprise our core values have also flourished in Korea. Freedom of expression. Ask anyone who's ever been to a Korean baseball game about freedom of expression, and they'll give their testimony. It's truly a memorable experience. But it goes far beyond sport. South Koreans are famous for their political and social expression. There is not a weekend in Seoul without people coming together in the spirit of community and common cause. The result is a vibrant civil society in which the right to worship, the right to socialize, organize, and debate political ideas is not only protected, but it's promoted. Protected by the rule of law, promoted by a society which, like their American allies, understands that we all benefit from these rights every single day. This is evident in the growth and prosperity of both of our nations, and over time, contrast that prosperity with the stagnation and deprivation resident within those nations where totalitarianism tramples freedoms and strangles protections, all in the self-interest of either a single party or single family rule. This brings me to the third and final element essential to the strength of the alliance, and that is demonstrated commitment. The United States is a Pacific nation, and we are committed to a free and open Indo-Pacific, a safe and secure region with unfettered access to the global commons, in which sovereign nations pursue prosperity while respecting and adhering to international rules and norms. 5 of the 7 collective defense treaties the United States is a signatory to are with Indo-Pacific nations. We conduct trillions of dollars in trade with Indo-Pacific nations. We are committed to regional security guarantees. As you heard yesterday, the preponderance of U.S. forces stationed outside our homeland are here in the Indo-Pacific. All of that to say we have a strong commitment and enduring relationships with a number of regional allies and partners. Many of you are here today, but our relationship with Korea is unique. The Republic of Korea is the United States' 6th largest trading partner, accounting for almost $170 billion in two-way trade in 2018 alone. But more importantly, there are nearly 2 million Americans of Korean descent. These Korean Americans are among our members of Congress. They are senior leaders in our military. They are diplomats, career bureaucrats, and leaders within our business communities. And likewise, over 200,000 Americans are visiting or living and working in Korea today. Americans separate and distinct from the 28,500 members of United States Forces Korea. These deep socioeconomic and sociocultural ties make our bilateral relationship special and assure the United States' enduring commitment to the Republic of Korea. This is evident in our continued strong forward posture, our deployment of key defense technology and resources, and our rotation of personnel and equipment which ensure our service members become acquainted with the unique requirements of warfighting on the Korean Peninsula. And the Republic of Korea consistently demonstrates its commitment as well. As its economy has grown and evolved, so too has the South Korean military capability. Once it was a force based on the strength of manpower alone. But today, the Republic of Korea Armed Forces has come of age. The same spirit of self-determination and innovation that fueled their meteoric economic rise is evident in the maturing and professionalization of their force. When it comes to fielding and resourcing a highly capable, disciplined, ready force postured for self-defense and to contribute to regional security and stability, we describe the Republic of Korea as an exemplary ally. The Republic of Korea government, they're committed to growing the annual defense budget to historic levels, up to 8.2% by 2020, bringing total resourcing to 3.7% of GDP. Further, they have committed to year-over-year increases that ensure the ROK Armed Forces is sufficiently funded to maintain the baseline capability and readiness necessary to continue the alliance mission of deterrence and defense while simultaneously enacting reforms and modernization to align their forces with changing demographics and the evolving security environment. Sacrifice, values, and commitment. To me, these are the fundamentals of our alliance. Over 65 years, we have grown together such that we are now inseparable, unbreakable. We are ironclad. In the 6 months since taking command, the team and I have prioritized visiting our combined units to speak to our operational commanders and to inspect the troops firsthand. It is my professional opinion that our combined defense posture and readiness is as good as it's ever been, if not better. These are the facts. Our combined response to the elevated military tensions of 2017 has served to strengthen our alliance. Our evolution in exercises has energized our senior leaders and staff to think in new and dynamic ways about regional threats. And our combined work on critical military capabilities is creating a stronger, more capable Korean Armed Forces, which contributes to a more capable military alliance. In response to the multiple and escalatory provocations of 2016 and 17, we presented a combined discipline stance which has served as a model for the world. We stood strong, but we also examined our posture to seek areas for continued improvement. For the United States, we were guided by our 2018 National Defense Strategy to pursue increased preparedness of U.S. Forces Korea and our extended regional support network. Through initiatives such as All Things Pacific and the Korean Readiness Review, we have systematically improved our forward posture for increased lethality, agility, and resilience. Our Republic of Korea partners are assisting us with our improved posture while simultaneously working to reform and modernize their own forces. Acquisition of new capabilities, alongside improvements and upgrades to existing systems, is leading the Republic of Korea Armed Forces to significantly buy down risk to mission and risk to force while evolving to meet future requirements. As you know, we suspended a couple of large-scale exercises coincident with senior leader engagements in 2018. This was a prudent action in support of diplomacy. Following those suspensions, we have worked to evolve our exercise design and execution by tuning 4 dials: size, scope, volume, and timing, bringing us into harmony with ongoing diplomatic efforts. The result is the alliance decision to conclude our series of legacy exercises and the alliance decision to develop new activities that are better suited to our current operational environment. Now, let me be very clear about the following. We continue to conduct combined training and exercises at echelon, from Combined Forces Command to our combined components, all the way down to unit level. We do so with the rigor and tempo necessary to maintain core competencies and interoperability. And we continue to validate our combined defense posture and do so under the simulated stress of crisis and contingency. Any suggestions to the contrary, and I've heard them all, are simply not true. This is a meme most often repeated by theorists and pundits who simply do not know the ground truth. The thing you need to understand is that we used to conduct large-scale exercises for 2 reasons. 1, as part of a high-profile deterrence campaign, and 2, to maintain proficiency in core wartime competencies. And under our revised training and exercise program, we continue to train each and every mission-essential task for U.S. Forces Korea and Combined Forces Command, but with a lower profile in the information space or reduced volume, all in support of our diplomats and their efforts. In the aggregate, the sustained improvements to our posture and readiness during both the period of elevated military tensions and the détente which has followed lead me to contend that the Republic of Korea and the United States field the most capable, the most disciplined and ready combined force anywhere on the planet. We have an ironclad alliance as a result of our shared sacrifices, core values, and demonstrated commitments. We field unquestioned and dominant lethality across all domains. We possess superior interoperability and continue to push the boundaries of innovation and modernization as we grow and evolve to be better postured and prepared for our combined defense and any future threats. We describe this on the peninsula as being ready to fight tonight. It is our solemn obligation to the millions of Koreans, Americans, and our regional partners and allies who depend on us for security and stability, and the generations of patriots to whom we owe our freedom and prosperity. My aim this morning has been to assure you, in no uncertain terms, that our alliance with the Republic of Korea remains as strong as ever and serves as a model for others. Now, let me say a few words about the strategic impact of our unique alliance. Combined Forces Command, in concert with U.S. Forces Korea, United Nations Command, and our sending state partners, ensures the security and stability of the Korean Peninsula by maintaining the combat stance and warfighting readiness required to reliably deter aggression. This same force acts to stabilize the region by defending, and if necessary, enforcing international accords that underpin the rules-based system essential to our shared prosperity. U.S. Forces Korea is a capable, ready force, forward deployed on the Asian continent, providing the Indo-PACOM commander and our national leaders with military options in support and defense of our national interests in a free and open Pacific that benefits all nations. Our continued partnership with the Republic of Korea is essential to that dynamic. Today, as it's been for 65 years, that relationship is ironclad, postured and ready for any contingency. Now, before I end, I need to say a few words about service in Korea. As I mentioned at the outset, my family has a long history of service on the Korean Peninsula. That history gives me a unique perspective in thinking about what it means to serve in Korea, in terms of both making a meaningful and lasting contribution to national defense and in the personal benefits of an overseas tour. Service in Korea has always been of utmost importance to our national defense and remains so today. In Korea, my father's generation held back the advance of communism while securing liberty for a people determined to pursue democratic principles and mutual prosperity. The Americans and multinational partners serving there today, they continue this legacy. Their work remains vital to maintaining the frontier freedom while ensuring regional security and stability. The divergent nature of North and South Korea following the Armistice Agreement has demonstrated the dramatic difference in the quality of life made by choosing one path over the other. Past generations of Americans who have contributed to the unbridled success of South Korea would be hard-pressed to recognize it today. Gone are the ills of the post-war period, and in their place is world-class infrastructure, thriving markets, cafes, restaurants, 4D movies. Don't ask me what a 4D movie is. I only know that people there love them. My point is that the era of the remote American camps surrounded by underdeveloped communities is over. And in its place, an assignment to Korea means enjoying all the benefits of one of the world's most modern, prosperous nations while being geographically primed to visit the rest that Asia has to offer. Today, Korea is an assignment of choice, one in which service members can tackle a difficult mission, one with historic importance, in which history is currently being written, and one which simultaneously places our service members and their families in an ideal position to make the most of their time in Northeast Asia. As I stated at the outset, it's been my intention this morning to give you my thoughts on the state of our alliance in Korea and its contributions to maintaining a free and open Pacific. Let me conclude by simply summarizing. The ROK-U.S. alliance is ironclad and is getting stronger every day. Together, our combined force assures the freedom and sovereignty of the Republic of Korea. It enhances the security of the United States and acts to defend the free and open Pacific in Northeast Asia. We maintain the combined defense posture and readiness necessary to our mission while supporting and preserving space for ongoing diplomacy that promises to chart a brighter future for all involved. We do this as allies and with the support of our two nations, whose abiding connections have only deepened and strengthened over the decades. We have gone together for over 65 years, and we continue to do so today. Kachi kapsida. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions. want me to read it? All right. Okay, first question. The United States has supported the Comprehensive Military Agreement since its signing in the fall of 2018. Has it made any difference with respect to denuclearization? What have we gained in relation to what we have given up? Great question. The Comprehensive Military Agreement, signed in September between the Ministry of National Defense, Republic of Korea, and their counterparts in the DPRK, lists a series of confidence-building measures that fundamentally reduce the chances of mistakes, reduces the chances of miscalculation, and has led to a palpable reduction in tensions on the peninsula. Let me give you some examples. So let me first, just by doing a show of hands. Who is in favor of permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula? Okay, good. Me too. I've been in 3 wars. I don't want to be in another war. I have no burning desire to be in another war. Now, having said that, as I just described in my remarks, we have kept that force postured. We're the insurance policy should the unthinkable happen. And we are ready. But the facts are, if you look through the history of the peninsula, where we have had incidents, where we have had conflict, where we have had provocations, it has largely been attributed to mistakes, misunderstanding, and miscalculation. So anything that removes or lessens the chances for mistakes, misunderstandings, miscalculations, all support the armistice agreement of keeping the 2 sides separated until such time that we have a peace treaty. And the reduction in tensions on the peninsula is palpable. So 10 guard posts on each side have been destroyed. And you're saying, well, I've been to Korea. You know, there's 250 or so on their side. There's 150 or so on the south side. So what? The so what is, not only were they destroyed, but as part of the verification process, both sides got to verify, personally verify with their own eyes, that the other side had complied. So on that morning in early December, 10 teams from the Republic of Korea Army, 5-man teams, stood on the MDL. They linked up with their KPA counterpart, who escorted them 500, 800 meters, 1,400 meters through the minefields to that destroyed guard post, personally inspected, and then were escorted back. And that afternoon, it was reciprocated by the Republic of Korea Army, who escorted those 5-man KPA teams. This is about building confidence. It's about building trust. It was conducted in a professional manner. No animus. They dealt with each other like professionals. It's a small ink blot of confidence building and trust building. Okay? We've separated, increased the size of the no-fly zone for unmanned aerial vehicles, rotary wing, and fixed wing along the eastern half of the demilitarized zone. And again, this is about reducing the chances for misunderstanding and miscalculation. We've clearly delineated what is okay along the northern limit line on both coasts. And having recently visited out to one of the Northwest Islands, that is one of the most complicated, you talk about complex, ambiguous, potentially volatile areas where there could be a mistake or miscalculation. You have to look no further than the Northwest Islands of the Republic of Korea along the northern limit line to see it in action, where you have the convergence of maritime forces from North Korea, South Korea, and occasionally others, as well as commercial fishing from multiple countries, all converged into a little tiny area where it requires extraordinary discipline and patience by all parties to ensure that commercial fishing can happen without the sparking of a conflict. And every day that goes by, it's building confidence in each other's ability to abide by international law. Inside the joint security area, I was there 5 years ago and visiting with my boss, and it was the DMZ that everyone remembers. It was the joint security area that everyone remembers. UN Command Security Battalion guards on the south side standing in the Taekwondo ready position. Helmets, Ray-Bans, ready to go. And the KPA was on the other side. I visited there the day after I assumed command. None of that. The JSA is completely unarmed today. There's 35 guards on each side. They go about their business every single day in a professional manner, interacting professionally. We've closed down all but 2 guard posts. And we verified each side, UN Command Security Battalion, KPA Security Battalion, came and mutually verified that the guard posts had been demilitarized, and each side put their own lock, seal, and took the key. We now share, there's probably 40 close combat or closed circuit TVs that monitor both sides. We now share each other's feed in both joint duty offices on both sides of the MDL. Unthinkable in the past. It's a small ink blot of what the future can hold in terms of mutual trust and confidence. So these are all nascent confidence-building measures that have lowered the temperature significantly on the peninsula. So how can you not be in favor of that? Right? You have to be in favor of that because it's a signal. It's a small picture of what the future can hold. Now, to the question it asked about, so what has this done for denuclearization? Well, what it's done is it's lowered the temperature that's allowed diplomacy to continue to work. And the door is still open. Regardless of your personal feelings about what came out of Hanoi, the facts are the door is still open and the sides are still talking. It's not well publicized, but those are the facts. And our goal remains the same, fully verified denuclearization of North Korea. That's the goal, and the door is still open, and the CMA has lowered that temperature such to a point that's allowed diplomacy to continue to work. General Abrams, cancellation of exercise 2018 has it led to a reduction in readiness? And did we get anything of value for this concession? So look, I'll simply say, like I said in my remarks, first off, it wasn't a concession, in my view. I think it was a prudent action made at the national level to open the door, to put the hand out. If you want peace on the peninsula, something has to change in the calculus. And we've been back and forth now since 1950. And it's going to take some time to build bridges, to build trust, to build confidence after nearly 69 years of mutual distrust and open hostility. So it was a prudent measure. But as I've stated, and I want to be crystal clear about it, combined training and readiness, it hadn't slowed down one bit. And we are continuing to conduct very rigorous combined training at echelon. Over 100 exercises thus far in 2019 alone. Happens at multiple levels. The single biggest difference, we just don't talk about it. We go about the quiet, professional work that our militaries are, continue to keep our readiness at a very high level, all contributing to a very strong combined defense posture. With the South Korean military coming of age, can you briefly describe the current state of OPCON transfer and the U.S. military movement towards supported relationship with our own partners? Great question. So many of you are probably vaguely familiar with this idea of OPCON transition. So first you have to understand the state, the current state, and it's evolved over time. But fundamentally, in armistice, let me be clear about this. In armistice, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for the Republic of Korea has operational control of all of the Korea Armed Forces. I don't, as the Combined Forces Command Commander. That's General Park Han-gi's job. Unlike our own system, in their system, not only does he have Title X oversight of the services, but he is also an operational commander. In U.S. parlance, he's also the NORTHCOM equivalent. That's what he is, defend the homeland in armistice. As we go through any potential crisis or incident, and we start to execute our crisis action standard operating procedures, we'll make alliance decisions about the defensive condition status on the peninsula. And only when we achieve DEFCON 3, as we call it, which again is an alliance decision, then the Iraq military, the Iraq Armed Forces, are given operational, they are provided operational control to the commander of Combined Forces Command, currently a U.S. four-star. It's been that way since the end of the war in various forms. We established CFC in 1978, and it's flourished since then, and those are the conditions. So only in DEFCON 3 and beyond does a U.S. four-star have operational control of the Iraq Armed Forces. So as the Iraq Armed Forces have matured over time, and the country has gotten stronger and developed as I described in my remarks, there's been this desire, an appropriate desire, at some point for a ROC leader, a ROC four-star, in potential wartime conditions. If we get to hostilities, that they should be the operational commander for the fight on the Pen. It's appropriate. It's their country, for crying out loud. Okay? The alliance is like this, at that point. So we've gone back and forth for the last 15 years. Is it an alliance decision to just move and make that decision for OPCON transition? Do we base it on time or not? We've come really close. But a decision was made in the 2012-13 time frame, instead of making it time-based, to make it based on conditions. So there are 3 agreed conditions that would set, and those conditions have to be met, whereby we would make an alliance decision at the highest level of our government to make that change and make it a ROC-led Combined Forces Command. So that was inked in 2014 and agreed upon by the Minister of National Defense and the Secretary of Defense at the time in 2015. And since 2015, the Republic of Korea and the United States have been working steadily together to get the ROC Armed Forces to meet those 3 conditions. And that work continues today. So the answer to the question is, we're making progress. We're making huge progress. But it is hard, difficult work. The framers of the COTP plan, they had it right. These are well thought out. It's based on the acquisition, development, fielding, and certification of critical military capabilities. In addition, it includes a new version of what the future CFC headquarters will look like and how it will be led by that ROC four-star. It involves the evolution of our terms of reference. When we have a ROC-led Combined Forces Command, what then is the role of U.S. Commander, U.S. Forces Korea? What then is the role of the Commander of United Nations Command, who's that same guy? And what is the role of the 4th hat that I wear now as the Senior U.S. Military Officer of Korea, the SUS-MOAC? Most people don't even realize that exists. But I am the day-to-day military representative of General Dunford as the direct counterpart to the ROC chairman as we work through alliance issues as the SUS-MOAC. So we're working through all that, and we're making a lot of great progress, and the ROK Armed Forces are 100% all in their Ministry of National Defense. In fact, the ROK government is all in to make the appropriate investments and commitment to meeting those conditions. This August will be, we believe we'll conduct an exercise this August that will serve as the first external assessment of initial operations capability of what the future CFC command is going to look like and how it will operate under the stress of simulated crisis and contingency. So for the exercise, we'll have a ROK 4-star who will serve as the acting CFC commander. I will assume duties as the deputy commander of Combined Forces Command, and we'll execute the exercise. It's not just the evaluation of the headquarters, but it's also an evaluation of the integration and interoperability of all of those critical military capabilities as part of contingency operations. So, and that's not well covered in the media. It's not just the headquarters, it's all of those critical military capabilities. If they've reached the appropriate level of maturity, they've got to get evaluated as well. Because in the end, as we all know as professional military officers, in the end, those critical military capabilities, they actually have to work in crisis and contingency. And so we've got an external assessment team that's going to be able to provide that. So the future is bright, and we're headed in the right direction. But to be clear, it's conditions-based, not based on time. People want to say, well, when do you think it'll happen? That's the next logical follow-on question. We're making progress. And the chairman and I, General Park-Guy and I, will render a report at the military committee meeting, at the security consultative meeting. Those are annual meetings of our alliance decision-making structure. We'll do that when that's scheduled in October, November timeframe. We'll provide an update to the Secretary of Defense and the Minister of National Defense, and we'll be able to chart the way forward, and I'm sure there'll be an announcement at the conclusion of that. I got all the time in the world, General Ham. I have no more time, but I'm happy to take any questions from anybody that's not on a card. Be brave.
Anybody care to speak up?
Colin Clark, Breaking Defense. I'm curious, you haven't mentioned the recent missile launches from North Korea. Are they fielding any new capabilities? What's your strategic assessment of the significance of these?
Tell me again how you characterize recent activities.
I use the term missile launch, which I know may not be entirely accurate. That's one of the reasons I asked.
Okay. Here's what I'll tell you. And I've said this multiple times on the record in front of the Congress of the United States at posture hearings, my confirmation hearing, and many other places. Training are routine activities of militaries all over the world in accordance with their national defense strategy, and these are routine activities. So, characterizing recent events, it all depends on where you sit, okay? My own perspective is that militaries around the world conduct routine military activities that include training of their specific capabilities. And we ought to just leave it at that. I can tell you this, recent activities on the peninsula by the DPRK has not changed the palpable reduction in tension on the peninsula. And the door for diplomacy remains open. Of course, we pay attention to what's going on up north, and we have our own assessment. and I'm sure you can appreciate that we choose not to characterize capabilities because that would compromise our sources and methods for gathering intelligence. But understand this, we have a world-class intelligence community, and it's a combined intelligence community. It's not U.S. unilateral. And with our intelligence sharing agreements with the Republic of Korea, we have a very good sight picture on what is and what is not going on in North Korea. But more importantly, since you asked, here's what is largely lost in the media space. Okay? When activities occur on the peninsula, and the recent activities are as good as evaluation of the strength of our alliance, we work hand in hand. We don't operate unilaterally. We're completely transparent. We have incredible trust and confidence between me and the ROC chairman. I'll bet we talk 7, 8, 9, 10 times a day during those activities to ensure that the alliance remains completely shoulder to shoulder, linked at the hip, complete transparency, so that we can make alliance decisions about what happened, why did it happen, what do we need to do about it, if anything, and most importantly, how are we going to talk about it in the information space? And there is no daylight between me and the ROC chairman. Zero. We have an excellent relationship. I've been doing this a long time, and I've trained with militaries all over the world, and I'll tell you that the relationship, the mill-to-mill relationship at Echelon is it's incredible. We are truly partners of one mind. I'm not going to put him on the spot. The ROC Army Chief here, General Suh, again, recently in position. He's been in position, I think, 40 days. But he was previously the ROC JCS J3. He did that job for 2 years. And I can tell you that at his level, ROC JCS J3 to the U.S. Forces Korea J3, who is also the C3, the same level of partnership, constant dialogue, constant communication, like one mind. So we continue to keep an eye on it. Our posture is strong. Everyone needs to remain steady in the saddle and allow diplomacy to work. General Ham, thank you. Thanks to you and AUSA for giving me a platform, giving me an opportunity to talk about Korea today. I am a lifetime member of AUSA, so Pat doesn't need to hunt me down outside. I'm in good standing. But thanks to all of you for attending, and I look forward to talking to you afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thanks, General Abrams. That was right on target. And we're glad that you came to LANPAC for the first time. We hope you'll come back in the future and keep us updated on this ironclad alliance. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thanks, General Abrams. Thank you very, very much. In several of the presentations yesterday, we heard about this kind of a change of how we view phased operations. So we find ourselves in competition and then, if necessary, a very rapid transition to conflict and then a return to competition. You can only do that if the theater has been properly established and set that allows that very rapid transition from competition to conflict. So our panel this morning is designed to specifically address that aspect of it. If I could ask the panel to come on up here to the stage. Our topic is specifically setting the theater, and our panel chair is Lieutenant General Andre Pegui, the Deputy Chief of Staff, G4, United States Army, and the panel will be moderated this morning by Major General Mike Terry, United States Army retired, the Senior Vice President for Defense Programs at AECOM. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first panel for the day. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Terry, and I'm very proud to be here as moderator of this panel. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank General Ham for hosting us today and for his leadership with AUSA. This panel's theme is setting the theater, with the focus of leveraging technology and innovation to overcome the tyranny of distance to achieve precision logistics in the Indo-Pacific region. Today we have represented on this panel some great senior people. Of course, they're logisticians and high-tech experts. And I'm proud to be sitting next to Lieutenant General Andre Peggy, who I'm so proud of him and his career and what he's done. He was a brigade commander in my organization in Iraq. Done great work for our Army. He's the G4 of our Army, and he's responsible for overseeing policies and procedures used by all of our Army logisticians throughout the world. Sitting next to him is Major General Charles Hamilton, Commanding General of the 8th Theater Sustainment Command, my old command. He's responsible for the Army's logistics operations throughout the entire Indo-Pacific region. Next to him is Brigadier Todd Ashurst, the Director General for the Logistics for the Australian Army. He's the equivalent of our Army G4. Next to him is Senior Executive Service Mr. Matthew R. Beebe, who is the Director of Acquisition J7 for the Defense Logistics Agency, where he's responsible for the development, application, and oversight of DLA acquisition policy, plans, programs, functional systems, and operations. And finally, at the end of the panel, is Mr. Chris Sauceda, IBM Account Manager for their Defense and Intelligence sector, focused on artificial intelligence, command and control, and cyber solutions for the U.S. Army. Planned but unable to attend today was Lieutenant General Giovanni Tuck, who is the J4 on the Joint Staff. Unfortunately, his duties kept him from attending. Ladies and gentlemen, logistics is tough business and not for the faint of heart. The last 18 years has demonstrated that our logistics soldiers are not only technically proficient in their skill tasks, but are warriors who engage the enemy toe-to-toe every day. As we know, we operated in areas where we were seriously challenged, but what we're looking at here in this region increases the complexities immensely. Tyranny of distance, a competitor who has the ability to reach out further to interdict our lines of communication, a competitor who is cyber savvy and has the means of using this capability with the potential to affect our automated systems, which are critical to our operations. Logistics operations are key to success in the multi-domain environment and is resident in all the elements of this environment. I was president 2 years ago, General Brown, when you attended Major General Sue Davidson's Commanders Conference, where you got up and you stated that logistics is the key to success in the multi-domain environment. That means a lot to this organization. How do we do it? Let's talk about it. As we proceed down the line with our panel members, they'll have 3 to 5 minutes each to put forth their points, and then at the end, when they're all finished, we'll take questions. So, having said that, General Peggy, if you'd please start.
Thank you, General Terry, who, as he stated, we had an opportunity to work together in combat. I worked for him, a great friend, great boss, and continues to be a great mentor. So it's an honor to serve on this panel with you. To AUSA and General Ham, thank you for another opportunity to participate in a wonderful symposium, and thank you for the work that you do day in and day out. Roger, sir, I got it. Hey, Roger. Joe Brown, sir, thank you so much for this invitation. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk a little bit about what's very important for us and key to success, readiness. And I see a lot of former bosses and mentors. I see General Thurman, who I worked for him in combat as well. And when we were both on the Korean Peninsula, sir, it's always great to see you, and the plethora of other great friends and mentors are here. Readiness continues to be the #1 priority, the #1 priority of the Army. The Chief always says there is no number 2. We're making great progress. We've made great progress in the last 18 months, 2 years, but there's still work to be done. If you have not had an opportunity to read the latest version of the Army Sustainment magazine, I'd ask you to do that. For the first time in the history of that magazine, the Chief of Staff of the Army has contributed to an article. Many of you have contributed to articles of this magazine, but the Chief himself penned an article talking about his priority, what he sees as important, and took the time to execute an interview for us. So I'd encourage you to go out and read that if you have not seen that. Regardless of any particular theater of operations, our sustainment force continues to play an integral role enabling our Army to be able to fight. In Korea, we talk about fight tonight, and we're able to do that because of the great logisticians and sustainers we have in that theater. We've done a lot of great work across the Army. Recently, we've paid considerable attention to equipment on hand. We have a great amount of excess equipment, and over the past 18 months to 2 years, we have transferred or divested of excess equipment over 1.3 million pieces. Tremendous amount of equipment, and lateral transferred that equipment to units that were short, and we've seen a dramatic increase in equipment on hand readiness. Having said that, we still have a considerable amount of work to do. We still have a considerable amount of excess equipment on hand, and that continues to be a major focus for us. General Ham talked about setting the globe. If you ask me what keeps me up at night, I will tell you to ensure that we have the right sustainment capability and stocks in the right place, be that anywhere in the Pacific, in the Korea, in CENTCOM AOR, or in Europe. We don't have enough commodities, so we prioritize what we do have, and hopefully we can ensure that we have the right capability with the right sustainment stocks at the appropriate level at the right time when needed. We've paid particular attention to that. We've done great work in the past 18 months with all things Pacific, and we think we have a good stance, but it's not perfect, and that continues to be a work in progress. We're operationalizing our Army preposition stocks as a technique that we're using to get after that. Where it used to take us weeks to deploy a BCT worth of equipment, now we can do that in hours. That is significant progress. Continue to work strongly with our partners, and I know Todd is going to talk more about that, but we cannot be successful in this theater without that wonderful relationship and partnership with our partners and allies. Some of the logistics techniques that we're using to improve our ability is achieving precision logistics that's taking advantage of innovation and technology. It's amazing what exists today that we in the Army are not taking advantage of. So my mantra is take advantage of today's technology today. So we're looking at a lot of that. Autonomous vehicles, either air or ground vehicles, manned, unmanned, teaming, and we can talk more about that. Additive manufacturing is another capability and technique that we've used a lot. Just in the past 18 months, we had, and as an example, MRAPs, 150 MRAPs that were down, non-mission capable, for $2.50 part. Put a demand on the supply system, and it was going to take us over 6 months to get those repair parts in. We were able to manufacture those, 3D print those items for $2.50, over 1,500 of those. In a matter of 4 days, we got 150 MRAPs up. That's capability that exists today that we have to take advantage of. We're going to be challenged with some of the intellectual property. We're going to work our way through that, working with Dr. Jetty from AT&L, and we think we're headed in a very positive direction. Demand reduction is another capability. We've talked about that for years, but that's a priority for us. So I'll stop there. A lot of great things are going on in our Army from a sustainment and technology and logistics perspective. We think we have a good stance, we're in a great shape, and look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to Major General Hamilton. Charles?
Thanks, General Pegues. Thanks, Joe Terry, and the other great panel members. Glad to be serving with you here today. Also like to thank General Ham. Sir, thanks for the great work you do at AUSA, and thank my boss, General Brown, as well. Now, I live here in Hawaii, so aloha. Aloha. Okay. That's slow. Not too bad. We might come back around to that. But I want to hit a couple of things today, and General Brown and I talk about this all the time, and he's a great logistician. A lot of our maneuver partners have really taken on sustainment over the last few years, which has enhanced us in a lot of great ways. But General Terry said it right. He said, hey, setting the theater, and that's my job. That's in my job description. Leveraging technology to close down some of those gaps with that tyranny of distance, that's all much. I got to give General Brown options in this theater because it's really hard. So as most great maneuver and and logisticians or sustainers out there, you got to understand your geography. And Jim Brown hit on a little bit yesterday. Here in Indo-PACOM, 52% of the Earth's surface, 4 billion people, with 2 billion connected to the cyber domain, 24 to 36 global megacities, population 10 million plus. By 2050, will consist of 70% of the global population, 3 of the world's largest economies, China, Japan, India, and 7 of the 10 largest militaries in the world, 5 declared nuclear states, and 5.3 trillion of the world's trade relies on access to regions using sea lanes. So huge area, lots of blue water, and then they go, hey, Hamilton, we need you to set the theater. And your supply chains are a great distance away. And that's why it's so important that we have a very deliberate relationship with Indo-PACOM, and I'm glad to see that General Davidson is here, formerly the 8th TSC commander, and also with the strategic rear. And that's AMC, Transcom, DLA, all those great enablers that help us close down those lines with our supply chains. So, but those relationships have to be very deliberate and can't just be, just in time or when it's time to break glass when we go into a contingency. So I get the privilege of being the senior law command here in Indo-PACOM. So I enjoy very great relationships with Korea, with the 19th ESC, the 593rd out of General Moore out of Fort Lewis, the 364th out of Fort Washington. And I can tell you that we are integrated. We have regular battle rhythm events. And part of my job is to synchronize and integrate all things logistics. That integration part I really can't say enough about. There's going to be so many constraints on lift requirements and setting the theater that we can't have any stray dogs and cats out there running their own operations. It's got to come through one top, it's got to come through the TSC top, and that's back to General Brown. And that way we could, move out different supplies and commodities based on his priority of effort, which will probably change daily. And there could be on occasion when I have to go into the top, and General Brown will have a brilliant plan. And I'll have to say, sir, I can't get those supplies here until this date. It could be a week, it could be 2 weeks. It'll be a tough, tough conversation. We haven't had to do that in the last 3 wars in our FOB operation. We had mountains of supplies, supply chains were, relatively green. We had air resupply. It was pretty good. But with a large-scale ground combat operation, it's going to be fast, lots of casualties, lots of requirements on lift, cult assets, medical supplies, et cetera. So we're going to have some pretty tough conversations. And one thing I'm extremely proud of in looking out in the audience is that the warrior logisticians that are here today, sir, they have bought into large-scale ground combat operations, decisive action, and they have taken it to task. In fact, 2nd Brigade had a great rotation out here at JRTC, knocked it out of the park. That BSB commander was all over it. I'm gonna just hit a couple of more points. I've got a menu of things, but I'm gonna just hit a couple more points. Access and agreements. That's how we close that tier in the distance. General Brown has tasked me to go out and take a look at that across Indo-PACOM and work with our great mill-to-mill partners out there to try to close down and get us better access, potentially to forward stage some different types of commodities across Indo-PACOM. ASOS, and I'll just close there. We recently had a TTX in January of this year, and that gave us a great look to see ourselves and our joint partners as well. So I'm seeing my time is on 0, so I'll close there and pass it on.
No worries. Thank you, General
Thanks,
Hamilton.
Charles. Todd, up to you.
Thank you, General Terry. General Ham, sir, General Brown, thank you very much. It is an extreme pleasure and an honour to be here with so many logisticians, and I say that because we are all logisticians. It is essential to the battle space and it is essential to win the conflict, but also to win the peace. Logistics is a difficult nut to crack, often lacking a modernisation priority due to dollar competition. Various nations' logisticians have always distinguished themselves through improvisation and adaptation. While this attests to the skills and abilities of our people, it should not be relied upon as a means to move a force through cooperation to competition to a conflict setting. or possibly do all three of those simultaneously. Too often it's forgotten that logistics is complex and a wicked problem. Warfighters will rarely have everything they want, and they will have to make operational decisions based on their logistic realities. A reliance on adaptation rather than preparation to deliver logistic effects at the right time and the right place is a fingers-crossed approach, and one that none of us can afford to do. A key realisation has to be the interconnection, a realisation of that interconnection between logistics to economics as part of national power, and as part of that, embracing technology. This connection then enables military kinetic and non-kinetic effects to occur through the ability of a nation to generate economic effort to sustain its efforts and its freedom of action. In an environment ranging from cooperation to conflict, logistics provides the opportunity to directly influence an area of responsibility through shaping and supporting regional capability, influencing and demonstrating commitment, particularly long-term commitment, and deterrence by demonstrating logistic capacity and resilience to follow through if required. I echo the Australian Chief of Army's thoughts yesterday about the importance of relationships as an underpinning element to building alliances and partnerships. Australia's alliance with the United States is our most important defence relationship and remains central to Australia's strategic and security arrangements. The Australia-United States alliance is underpinned by a deep level of cooperation across a broad spectrum, including training, exercises, intelligence, logistics and capability development. Australia's international policy framework underscores the ongoing importance of the US alliance in our region as we navigate an increasingly complex strategic environment. Australia's goal is simple. We aspire to a secure, open and resilient Indo-Pacific. To achieve this goal, we need to build on our broader regional partnerships and alliances, and I believe the use of logistics is a key enabler. This would support the contention that relationships can be built on more than the transactional, but more towards enduring relations based on shared interests and values. This environment engenders trust, removes any necessity for direct permanent presence, therefore becoming a foundation stone to mutual respect and understanding. It is for this reason I personally prefer the term of setting the region. It instantly recognises and encourages the importance of sovereignty and provides nations a stake in it rather than potentially being seen as just part of a broader military battle space. Recognition of sovereignty is crucial for accessing host nation support and agreements to access to ports, terminals, airfields and bases within the region. Nations need to have their freedom of choice, and true partnerships cannot be built solely through the lens of an operational theatre environment to access that nation's land bases or resources, but rather partnering with a nation to enhance their capability and their resilience. To truly set a region requires situating military commitments in a whole-of-government and interagency context, focusing on importance of partnership and nation building, but at that nation's pace, not ours. We also need to be mindful of what their goals are. The key is listen, listen, listen. The changing regional environment requires us to leverage all of our elements of national power to promote a secure, open and prosperous and resilient Indo-Pacific region through assisting with critical infrastructure. Australia has recently made substantial offers of security infrastructure support to the Pacific Islands, including the redevelopment of Fiji's Black Rock Peacekeeping and Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief Camp and Papua New Guinea's Lobram Naval Base through a joint initiative with PNG on Manus Island with the support of the United States. All of this is part of Australia's $2 billion infrastructure financial support being provided into the Indo-Pacific. These initiatives build on Defence's enduring commitment to the region, including Pacific Maritime Security Program, providing replacement patrol boats, integrated aerial surveillance and enhanced regional coordination. Logistic preparedness activities need to be simultaneously occurring as part of enhancing the capability of our partner nations in order to build their capability, capacity and their resilience. Improving airfields, ports, terminals and bases should be enduring activities of mutual output which should facilitate MLSAs, standing offer panels and host nation support framework agreements. While these are important, the most critical activity is to actually test these logistic frameworks in a realistic timeframe and exercise scenarios in order to build mutual assurance and increase understanding of interoperability. Our logistics systems need to be truly tested and exercised in order to understand where we're required to improve. Another critical factor is for us not to commit contracting fratricide. Competing checkbooks amongst allies and partners is not helpful. A greater benefit is gained by investing in a nation's resources, for example, those aspects of industry that can assist in our mutual logistic outcomes. By also making this investment with trusted partners and allies, we can increase our supply chain illumination and enable greater expeditionary logistic possibilities. While this will assist in nation building, we can also have the benefit of diversifying supply chains with trusted allies and partners, making us more resilient. Investment in sovereign industries to support our militaries within the region is not about reducing our own organic capacity, but through pooling demand signals, through partners and allies, generates options, reduces supply chain lengths, increases logistic interoperability, and builds economies and develops logistic assurance. In summary, setting the region is all about working with our regional partners, investing in long-term engagement projects, and engagement needs to be tailored to the needs of our regional nations. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Todd. Some great words there. I'd like to move on now to SCS, Mr. Beatty.
Good morning, and thank you, General Terry, and also General Pagee. I'm going to speak this morning briefly about Operational Contract Support, or OCS. The doctrinal definition of OCS is the process for planning for and obtaining supplies, services, and construction from commercial sources in support of joint operations. I think we're all very familiar with the fact that we are highly reliant on support from industry, and it is through OCS that we look to coordinate that support in a battle space for operations. But one thing I want to make sure that I leave with you is that OCS is not just a contracting concern. And this is, if you hear nothing else from me, I hope you take this. It is commander's business. It requires significant planning. It must assess the changing operational requirements. It does require logistic support and, yes, contracting strategies. But it is that collective responsibility that we have to keep in mind as we are looking at setting the theater and conducting operations. So why is DLA sitting here talking about OCS? Well, let me tell you about our role in OCS and see if you can make the connections. First of all, on the planning front, within DLA, we have the Joint Contingency Acquisition Support Office with embedded planners in each of the COCOMs to help aid the development of Annex Ws for the operational plans, and also in helping to institutionalize the Operational Contract Support Integration Cell, or OCSIC. In the Pacific Theater, the Air Force is the lead service for contracting, and Colonel Lucardi has developed a great structure and exercises that structure regularly in Tier 1 exercises and also in response to HADR events. Through the use of Joint Requirements Review Boards to validate and prioritize requirements, and the Joint Contracting Support Boards to coordinate and deconflict, we are looking to not only eliminate contractor fratricide, but also ensure that we have timely support. For DLA supply chain management, every time we put global solutions in place, we have global solutions for all commodities such as food, fuel, medical supplies, construction-related materials, weapon system parts. Every time we are putting those solutions in place region by region, we are not only looking for how they will support current ops, but how they can surge and fulfill operational requirements that may arise. And not only is it for a given region, but we look at how we can have the resiliency of support from neighboring regions because of the requirements changing. Thanks. We are also pre-positioning materials, working with the COCOM and the service. Recently, we have moved an additional $90 million worth of supplies into the Korea region. That includes food, Class 4 materials, increasing fuel levels, first aid kits, surgical resupply sets, and forward stocking over 800 lines of additional repair parts. That is for the Korea set, and by no means is the effort done, because the environment is constantly changing, not only for Korea, but also other theaters, and we need to look at how we can not only solve today's issue, but be able to flex and solve emerging issues either in the intended location or the neighboring locations. The amount, location, survivability, and balancing industry capability requires that constant coordination and assessment. So DLA is a combat support agency required to provide tactical support during combat operations, and we have our deployment cells ready to provide that forward logistics support coordination, utilizing our rapid deployment teams and also our deployment depot capability to make sure that we can deliver those supplies forward whenever necessary. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to Mr. Sauceda, please.
Good morning, General Paghi, General Terry. I appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you guys on this panel. I'm usually wearing a suit and tie, so I'm kind of digging this aloha dress code. I'm going to talk about 3 areas today. I'm going to talk about data, advanced analytics and artificial intelligence, and additive manufacturing. In relation to data, what we've seen historically is customers, you guys, are wanting to move directly into AI. It takes a lot of technical and cultural buy-in to get to that point. If you imagine a staircase with enterprise management and database management, content management on the left-hand side, and AI and reasoning on the far right-hand side, the progress of big data platform implementation, then moving into standard and ad hoc reporting, up to statistical analysis and predictive and prescriptive capabilities, and then finally machine learning and advanced AI reasoning. That's a sequential process. And in many cases, we found that even our most advanced customers are only touching the edge of forecasting and predictive and prescriptive capabilities. There are initiatives out there. The Air Force is trying to predict engine failures. The AMC and TACOM are working on the Stryker preventative maintenance, leveraging predictive and prescriptive analytics. And in many cases, or in several cases, we're dealing with legacy data from statement systems, right? That data lake has to be drained, cleaned, sorted from the ground up before you can ever move into even the basics of ad hoc reporting and advanced analytics. In relation to AI and machine learning, I'm not going to go into the details of machine learning, but I will highlight a key difference in AI technologies. For many years, AI was based on statistical modeling, data science process, executing a series of numerical scores to identify an outcome. If you haven't seen the Netflix documentary on AlphaGo, about Go in the Korean Peninsula, that was actually a very good hour-long Netflix series that talks about, or show that talked about linear regression, that process of training AI. What changed in the last few years is natural language processing came online, right? Our ability to use tools associated with natural language processing and systems that understand how we communicate, right? Historically in the past, we've had to teach people how the computers communicate. Now it's the other way around, where we're teaching the computer how the humans interact. And in that vein, context matters a lot, right? A tanker to an armor officer means one thing. A tanker to an Air Force officer means another thing. And yet another thing to a supply officer. So it's important to have the commercial tools that understand the context in natural language processing. And they're getting very good at doing things like being able to pull out sentiment analysis on social media, for example, or relevant information out of a police report for the security clearance process, right? That's what natural language processing brings to the table from an AI perspective. Here's the challenge with that. It's the bias in the models, right? In many cases, we don't have large enough statistical populations to accurately measure the effectiveness of the AI. And so we're just training them on historical representations, historical outcomes. So back to my clearance example, if we train the AI to model human behavior against an adjudicator that has an inherent bias, well, clearly that bias is going to be in the model. And here's the sticky part, right? Who's responsible for that? How do you deal with that? So if you have AI bias, this is a topic of discussion that's actively going on right now between, we've had partnerships with MIT, with the Joint AI Center of Excellence. How do you do quality assurance, and how do you tease the bias out of the models, right? If an AI tool recommends that your clearance get yanked, who gets sued? Is it the data scientist that built the model? Is it the software developer that coded the tool, right? These are active questions that are being discussed right now as we look to implement AI across the enterprise. And finally, I want to talk about additive manufacturing and 3D printing very briefly. There's been a lot of progress in 3D printing and additive manufacturing and how it impacts the supply chain. It won't be very long before 3D printing is prevalent on the battlefield. And there won't be any need to push spares and repairs because you'll just print it right there. General Piggy talked about the MRAP parts that were printed for the 150 or 200 MRAPs. Here's the challenge. You need a technology like a blockchain technology that creates a secure ledger across the enterprise, right? How do you know that printer's firmware hasn't been compromised, right? What about the CAD file? Was it surreptitiously modified? You know, what about the pedigree and provenance of that part? All that can be talked about, tracked in a blockchain-like technology. I think that would be important moving forward. So I thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. All right, folks, now we're going to get into the lightning question round. And we've got some pretty good ones from the audience. Of course, we have little softballs that we've developed just in case no questions came, but we've got some great ones that I think are going to challenge the panel. And I've issued some out, and I'll ask each individual to address the question that was presented to them in a very brief response, please. Okay, so, Sir, General Piggy, this one was addressed to the entire panel, but I figured General Piggy is probably the right person to respond to this.
Yeah, very good question. We spent a great deal of time yesterday with panelists arguing for the need for forward posture because of the inadequacy of the tip fit to meet the needs of the competition. How does the sustainment force balance that belief with global support and resource limitations? So I was not here yesterday, so don't have the benefit of the discussion, but I will tell you that we are posturing forces forward. We have BCT in Korea, as you know, on a rotational basis. We have a BCT in Poland on a heel-to-toe rotational basis. And there are other rotational forces that are being considered now that we might see in other places around the globe. That has been a good technique, a capability. We build readiness by consuming readiness in previous rotations. So we think that's of great benefit of how we currently operate and be able to have a forward presence. So I think you would see more of that. As you all know, from a sustainment perspective, 78% of sustainment structure in our Army is in the Compo 2, Compo 2, Compo 3, National Guard, our U.S. Army Reserve. A lot of that is first to deploy units, port opening capability, and doing the work with all things specific. We've determined that we may not have that balance just right. You've probably heard General Lucky say that we are a bit, we think, out of balance with our force structure mix. So we're relooking that, and some of that capability we might bring back into the active component, and we'll transition structure. We'll continue to be balanced, but we could potentially some of that first to deploy units, early sustainment capability that's required early into a war fight where we may not be able to mobilize in time to meet. We could potentially, we're considering moving some of that structure back in the active component. And as I talked about earlier, as we talked about setting the globe, it's a balance of putting the right amount of stocks forward in a pre-positioned location, and you hope that you assume that the COCOM that needs those stocks is where the fight's going to be. But typically we don't guess right, and we don't have sufficient stocks to put globally. So we prioritize based on DOD prioritization of where we place our stocks. Munitions is a great example. We don't have sufficient munitions to fight a EUCOM fight, a PACOM fight, and a CENTCOM fight. So we prioritize those munitions. We have a mix of what we think those initial requirements will be for the early days of the fight, but in no way can we afford to set the entire globe. So we prioritize what stocks we want to place, and we've been had a great level of success so far. So hopefully that's kind of scratches the itch of that question. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And just to pile on with what General Pegues said, it's a long time ago, but when we first went into Iraq and those places, we were expeditionary in terms of our logistics capability with water purification, making water all throughout Iraq, even laundry and bath. My goodness, before we started transitioning to the log cap contract, we had to do it all ourselves. And those are some of those capabilities that General Pegues is looking at, I'm sure. Okay, thanks, sir. Going to move on now to Major General Hamilton. Sir, if you would address the question that you're presented.
Yeah, it's kind of a two-part question, and I think I recognize the penmanship and the pen on this one, looking around here. How will Army divestment in watercraft, impact sustainment operations in Indo-PACOM? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, what are the mitigation strategies? So I think for Indo-PACOM, I think that we're going to be okay with watercraft. There have been some divestment, but I think we're going to be okay. I think we made a pretty good case to the enterprise and our mission here, all the blue water, et cetera. And Indo-PACOM did a great job, John Davison and USAPAC and others. So I think we're okay with watercraft and Indo-PACOM. However, as we think through this problem, the second part of the question, what's the mitigation strategy? And that's where we owe General Brown real options. And part of that, and I think that's why we have AUSAs, General Ham, is because all our industry partners are here. And they get to help us really solve these really tough problems. So if you haven't been following, we've had a divestment of Army watercraft in the Army. And at some point, I would think we would look to industry to potentially come up with a solution to help us out with that. And so it could be, obviously it would be a contracting solution on our side to them, but certainly that would help. But in Indo-PACOM, I think we're okay. And then technology is really going to help with that. I didn't get to hit on the log cop part of the, because my time kind of ran out, but the enterprise down to an FSC's got to be able to see the same data. Going to one of the points over here with artificial intelligence. I've got to have a cop when a depot gets hit, it's got to come up online and give me a couple of courses of action. It's got to tell me what I got intra-theater where I can move it very quickly. I got a staff to help me with that, but also I got to have technology. And then the enterprise on the back end of that has got to be able to say the same thing, see the same thing, and automatically start, pushing supplies and commodities forward. So I think through technology, that's going to help out a great deal. I think industry is going to help mitigate that. And then just for the watercraft overall, I think we're okay with our cuts or the investment here in Indo-PACOM. And I hope that answered the question.
And if I could pile on that.
Please, sir.
And I don't recognize, so I won't call out John Davison, and I'm not sure if that's serious or not.
It wasn't. One of my guys.
I'm sorry, Sue. And I know John Davison and I have talked. It was a great question. We acknowledge the requirement. As a former CENTCOM J4, I completely understand the importance of Army watercraft. There is a global demand for Army watercraft, and I tell you, from the department's perspective, we just got to consider not just Army watercraft, but all watercraft, not only Navy, but our allied and partner watercraft and capability as well. So I would just remind us that we identify what our requirements are, and then we'll work with all of the Department of Defense as well as our coalition partners to ensure that we have the right capabilities to support the combatant commander.
Thanks. Any other comments from the panel on that question? Great. Okay, Brigadier Ashurst, if you'd address at least one of the questions you got so far.
Yes, question was, now that Australia is part of the US National Technology Industrial Base, is Australian defence industry moving to produce common ammunition items with the United States? And is Australian Defence Force supporting high commonality of ammunition with the US? Fantastic question. 60% of Australian defence, or correction, I'll say Army, 60% of defence materiel and the Australian Defence Force is sourced from the United States. So that automatically gives a level of commonality. And our Australian government, which has just been re-elected on Saturday, so for its third three-year term, has made massive investment in sovereign industrial capability for defence, the largest investment since the Second World War. So what that basically has led us to is, over the last few years, massive investment in things such as shipbuilding, weapons manufacture. We are manufacturing the combat reconnaissance vehicle that we are purchasing, will be made in Australia, and we're planning to manufacture our infantry combat vehicle as well in Australia. In terms of ammunition, government still owns our ammunition factories, which we are not going to change that setting. But we have partnership arrangements with Thales at the moment, who operate those factories for us, but we are looking at broadening that through other commercial arrangements as well in Australia. So in the short way to answer that question, we are actually allowing ourselves to do it. The key thing is about demand settings, to answer that first component. There has to be a demand setting in order to enable industry to grow and prosper. But I think it is there, and Australia could certainly support it. We have the supplies of the materials required, the raw materials, to achieve it. In terms of commonality, obviously we can't have every single piece of item for the US. We look for commonalities, particularly in the joint fire space. We'll be looking for commonality, and we will be looking for those opportunities for our industrial capacity to play part of the global supply chain in support of our partners and allies.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, we'll continue to move on down the line to Mr. Beebe, please.
Yeah, the question I've received, contractor support can play a major part in our ability to fight. What are your thoughts on industry's ability to support our requirements? Well, bottom line, industry can support most anything that we incentivize them to do. The question is always, what are the gaps that we are trying to fill, and what is the best means of supporting that gap? Let me start with, as an example, weapon system spare parts. Quite often those are very long lead time, and turning to industry at time of need is not the right solution. So we of course rely very heavily on stock, and where we choose to position that stock based on whatever we can anticipate on requirements. Now there are emerging technologies, you mentioned additive manufacturing, that may close some of those gaps so that we can have a little more ability at point of need, but we are still a ways away from having all of the data solutions and all of the secure process solutions to be able to solve that in a grand scale. So very often we do rely very heavily on commercial processes and capability. Let me talk about fuel for a moment. And clearly there is a very robust commercial supply chain when it comes to fuel. There is ample amount of aviation fuel available around the globe, but that is commercial aviation fuel, and we of course are dealing with mil-spec aviation fuel. So the question becomes how best to rely on industry to solve that for us. Do we require additional storage, or do we expect industry to be able to support us at time of need? We do always look at alternative solutions, and aviation fuel is an example of that. The additives required to convert commercial aviation fuel into mil-spec aviation fuel is something that is normally added at the refinery. We are looking at alternatives to pre-positioning those additives such that we can continue relying on global capability for commercial aviation fuel and convert it to mil-spec at time of need around the globe. So it basically comes down to, again, industry can solve most anything we need. The question is, what are we prepared to fund as far as an insurance policy, and what can we develop as far as alternative solutions, whether it be things such as additive manufacturing or relying more heavily on commercial supply chain and converting it to our needs later in the process. So I have no question on industry's capabilities. The question is that we have to constantly assess our requirements, the changing requirements, and how our alternatives and how best to support it. Last thing I'll mention is the constant conversation when it comes to functions such as transportation and the degree to which we want to rely on transportation distribution, degree to which we want to rely on industry versus organic capability. As we know, organic capability has changed over time, and therefore we are relying more heavily on industry further and further into the battle space, and it's something we have to constantly assess and constantly look at our options for solution. But bottom line, industry can solve most anything that we are ready to incentivize them to do.
Thank you, Matt. Let's move on to Mr. Salceda, please.
Yes, sir. The question that I had is, leveraging artificial intelligence solutions require a robust understanding of your data. Are there any best practices to moving an organization down the path to leveraging AI technology? The short answer is yes, of course. But I would say that we're all learning, right? Just as much as you guys are learning, we're learning on our side. You know, IBM has an initiative called Moving Your Organization to a Cognitive Enterprise. And it starts with bucketizing your information, bucketizing your data. In our space, it would be bucketizing personnel information or logistics or operational information. You're moving to a process for discovery, for extraction, analytics, and then visualization, right? It's almost like a circular cycle. The point being is you're trying to accelerate the OODA loop, right? You're trying to accelerate the decision-making process. I prefer the term augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence. If you imagine the decision that a commander makes on the battlefield today as a risk matrix, we've all heard the just go with what you've got, right? We need to make a decision now. You know, bucketizing, categorizing your data, training your systems, your processes to move to an AI environment allow you to make a more well-informed decision, move up to high right on your risk chart, and the commander's now making a more quality decision based on a more robust amount of information that didn't necessarily happen in the past.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to throw one out there to the group right now, like a jump ball. And this is pretty loaded, and you know, you kind of have to dig a little bit, I guess, because you're looking to see where you find fault in yourself, which you know we should all be able to analyze ourselves. So, fits the whole panel, and see who jumps at this. What assumptions are you working off of that, if proved false, would adversely or catastrophically affect the ability to project power, and what are our mitigations? So. You know, okay, so that's telling everybody this is what we think was going to happen, and if it fails, it's going to be a real problem. What are we doing to mitigate it? Charles, you go through wargaming all the time with your unit. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us on that?
Well, thanks, John. I think one thing we say all the time, you know, there's a plan, and as most of you know that have participated in the operation, there's the plan, and then there's reality. And so I have not, you know, gone on any combat operation off of a plan that was sitting on the shelf that we rehearsed and we war game. So things change, you know, the terrain changes, the enemy has a vote, etc. But going to power projection, I think one thing that's happened in the last, I guess, 60 days is that AMC now has mission command of MCOM. And so now that comes into the sustainment community. And one of the things besides the great housing that we have and how we're working on that is now that we can combine that with power projection. We've always done it kind of walking around each other a little bit and working very closely with each other, but now that it's part of the sustainment community, in particular Army Materiel Command, I think that gives us a little more leverage to be more deliberate in our process in working that. So I think before, I would use the assumption that, yes, we would go here and work this particular thing, but now have more of a deliberate way to get to power projection in my plan. And I hope I kind of touched or scratched the itch a little bit in that question.
Thanks, Charles.
So if I could comment, and I'd ask Chris from an industry perspective your thoughts about this. But I will tell you, cyber is, I think, a threat to us, especially in the sustainment domain, that we may not be able to see ourselves communicate instantaneously as we have in the past. and I'm not sure if we are prepared to fight in the cyber domain, and that would be, I think, a challenge that we've not encountered before that could have catastrophic impact if we are not prepared. And we're doing things to get ourselves ready to be able to see ourselves operate in a disconnected environment, but there's much work to be done. And Chris, I'd like to get your thoughts from the civilian environment.
Yeah, and I think from a technology perspective, that's something like a blockchain solution is going to have to be implemented, right? You know, distributed assured identity. When we're working with other partners, when we're working with industry, you know, you have to have the ability to know and the pedigree and provenance of the entity that you're dealing with, and know that it hasn't been tampered with, and that, you know, whether you're dealing with from a supply perspective or a cyber perspective or even an operational perspective, you know that that information is assured, and the validity of the validity of the entity is true. And in a distributed space where you could be dealing with, another country's, one of our nation partners that's not tied into our NIPRNet, right? You're going to have some kind of ledger solution, distributed assured identity solution to operate in the multi-domain battle space moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Any more input?
I'd probably say that the key lesson has been about strategic lead times. I think there's always been an assumption, certainly in Australia. Our white paper indicated that we would always have significant notice, and so therefore there would be appropriate time. I don't think that's there anymore. I think that's been recognised by our government, and I think that's one of the key lessons, which then automatically reflects on a number of things that General Hamilton has already spoken on about stock holding, about understanding actually your force posture from a sustainment perspective.
Thank you, sir. Okay, General Pagee, you've got an interesting question in front of you. If you'd like to address that, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. How important is persistent engagement by our U.S. forces with APODs, SPODs, railheads, and national regional transportation leadership to our Army readiness? I think that's a great question. And I like to use an illustration or an example. I know that we sit in Indo-PACOM today, but I'd like to use the EUCOM AOR as an example. About 18 months, 2 years ago now, in our first deployment to Poland, brigade level exercise where we shipped our equipment, that was about the first time we had almost a Reforger-like deployment of a brigade with all of its equipment. And I know I see some heavy tankers in the room, and when we found that when we got to the port of Bremerhaven, every tank, 100% battery was dead because we did not execute appropriate shutdown procedures on our tanks. Not surprising that every battery was dead. And then we loaded the ship by equipment. And then when we wanted to quickly download and move to a tactical assembly area, we could not because we loaded the ship by equipment types. So we had to marshal to a staging area, rearrange the entire ship by unit, and then move the units to a tactical assembly area. We loaded up the rail, and as we went through the first set of terminals, we realized that we did not collapse all of the equipment that hangs off the side of Bradleys, and we had a significant number of Bradleys non-mission capable because they were too wide to go through the tunnels. So we decided we couldn't use the rail. We got to use heavy equipment transport. We put them on trucks, and then we transited through the German towns, and we found that the routes that we had selected, the roads were too small to transit through the road network at that location. And we ended up going 300 miles out of the way to get to our final destination in Poland because we had not stayed connected with the railheads, with the APODs, SPODs, etc. However, we are a learning organization working with SGDC at another location of a deployment of a aviation brigade. We found that if we purchased and rented at least the appropriate type of vessel, where we did not have to take the rotors off of the Blackhawks when they arrived at their port, within 2 hours they had to put the aircraft back together and were flying to their tactical assembly area. But because we had reconned the location where we were going, we purchased the right type of ship that we didn't have the impact on the weapon systems that we were flowing over. We found that we could quickly transition to a tactical assembly area, and we learned from those lessons that prevented us from doing that in the past. If you look at our force projection platforms in CONUS, they have atrophied over the years because we've not used those. In a COIN fight, we've used FOBs, we fell in on equipment. That equipment was maintained by contractors to a large degree. So we lost that muscle memory, that capability to sustain not only our equipment from a readiness perspective, but that force projection platforms, the rail heads, the road network, that's going to be critical for us to rapidly deploy a unit. So it's absolutely critical for us to stay nested with our force projection platforms, with the A-pods, S-pods. We must select multiple locations that we might deploy because our enemy has a vote, and if they prevent us from deploying to a particular S-pod, we can go to another location. Absolutely critical that we build these relationships with our coalition partners. That gives us flexibility. The more flexibility we have into our system, Sean Hamilton talked about that earlier, the higher the capability that we have. So great question, and we're doing a lot of that work now. Thank you.
Well, that was really good, sir. Thank you. We remember those reforgers. They were vital. Here's another jump ball type question, and it has to do with the multi-domain environment of the domains, the land, air, sea, space, human, cyber. Which is most challenging for you and your organization? Charles, I'm going to skip you first. Todd, in those, the Australian Army, the most challenging environment for you to operate in, we talk about the multi-domain environment of the United States military, air, land, sea, human space, cyber. What do you see as your greatest challenge?
I'm biased. I say the land. It is not platform-based. It is not self-sustaining to a degree for specific periods. It is a harder environment, and particularly if we look at the size and breadth of the region and what those challenges would be. The littoral environment for us is the challenge that we have to get across. We are developing our amphibious capability. I think we are trying to understand the next challenge for us is truly our partnership, working closely with the Marines on developing that.
Right.
But I think we have a fair way to go in terms of understanding our sustainability.
A lot of what's going on in Darwin with the Marines, the United States Marines operating in there, coming in through the ports and the training areas, very dynamic.
And I think it's forcing, the Marine Rotation Force Darwin is an absolutely fantastic activity. The numbers this year are now at the largest that they've ever been. It provides Australia a fantastic opportunity to learn about interaction. At the moment, the Marines are trying to work out how to get from Darwin down to Shoalwater Bay training area.
Right.
That's a great challenge. We just started using rail. We experimented using rail in Australia to move military for the first time in 2018.
Wow.
Since I was the S4 of our 1st Brigade in 2004. It hadn't been done since. The Chief of Army is now committed that we will continue to use rail. So I think there's this great challenge for us to actually understand how do we achieve the sustainability of our force, and I think the land is the complex one.
Okay. Thank you. Very good.
I can add to that.
Go ahead.
So from a technology perspective, I'm an analogy guy. I like to use analogies. So the analogy I like to highlight is how do you find the digital version of a burning tire? Right? So when you roll into the Iraqi neighborhood and the tire starts burning, that's a signal to the neighborhood, right? The problem in the multi-domain battle space is there's so much information. Commanders can't keep up to date with the amount of information that's out there to make decisions. In an MD, if you're a squad leader in a mega city in 5 years and you don't have the ability to comb through social media information, broadcast media information, network information, real-time, instantaneously to gain situational understanding, you got a problem. And so, you should be able to leverage technology to see that somebody just tweeted, hey, the bridge around the corner from my house just got blown up. Well, AI technology will then correlate that to point to you, let you know that that was your point of egress, right? That person didn't say it was, XYZ bridge. They just said around the corner from their house, right? Everything is geotagged. And so, there's so much information that has to be correlated in the multi-domain battle space. We're going to have to get after advanced analytic and AI technologies to stay on top of that. And we're never going to get situational understanding, and our adversaries are going to pass us up.
Thanks, that was great. We'll have one more question, and then I'll ask Lieutenant General Pickey to wrap it up for us. Charles, I think it would be great if you'd address that last question we gave you.
Okay, thanks, sir. It's really I had two questions, but like you said, they kind of cross each other. And the first one is, you mentioned needing to set the theater for General Brown, which is, the Army USAPAC. What about your Army role for log support to Indo-PACOM? So great question, Air, Army, Marines. And then the second question is, how would your slide preparing the theater change if you included all joint and combined logistics capabilities? And how do you practice gaining access to these joint and combined assets? So one, we do have visibility through Indo-PACOM on the additional joint capabilities out there within the Air Force, Marines, et cetera. But we have not started to practice that yet from a tactical execution level. So that's something that we are working on. I've talked to the different commanders at different levels to let them know if we go into contingency, how we synchronize and integrate logistics throughout the theater. And I would have to, on occasion, garner their assets, like an MLG, from the Marines, to use that to potentially, as a headquarters, to move supplies around the battlefield. So those discussions are happening. Haven't had the opportunity to really practice it yet. And then you're exactly right. This is what the question is alluding to. This is definitely just like on the maneuver side. It's a joint fight. On the sustainment side, it's a joint sustainment fight as well. No way that we're going to go out there on our own, the Army, and not rely on the Air Force, the Marines, and our other joint partners and coalition partners as well to get this mission done. So great question. It's an Indo-PACOM, definitely a joint fight across the board.
And then,
thanks, Charles.
if I could just expand on that, because
very quickly, we're about to run out of time, please. Go ahead, Matt.
So just, you mentioned the various partners, and of course industry is part of that. And that becomes the importance of the integration cell, the OCS integration cell, and the fact that the commander can reach to the integration cells on, are there valid requirements, and what are our alternatives to solve that from an industry perspective as you balance the organic versus industry capability.
Thank you. General Pickey.
It's some great questions. I really appreciate those. Very enlightening and an indication of your thought of the great work that's required of our logisticians throughout Indo-PACOM and throughout our Army. I think what I've learned, my takeaway is that we have to continue to leverage technology. We won't be able to do it all ourselves. There's technology out there that exists today. It's important, critically important, that we partner with industry and our allies to take advantage of capability that exists to improve our ability to sustain the war fighters. It's critical that we have the ability to operate in the MDO environment, extending our ability to operate independently. Sustainment is critical and key to success of that, and it's absolutely critical that we continue to set the globe with capability based on our national priorities, and I think we've done that. There's work to be done, but with an example of what we've done in Pacific, with all things Pacific in the past 18 months with the threat in Korea was absolutely phenomenal. I've recent tours in Korea, and the mantra is always fight tonight. But I would tell you, we were not prepared to fight tonight then. We couldn't fight tonight, next week, or anytime soon. But I will tell you now that we are prepared to fight tonight and win. That's because of the great work of our national leaders and the great work of the men and women in this room and those that you represent. So thanks to all of the logisticians, the great work that you continue to do. Sustainment continues to be vitally important. And lastly, thanks to AUSA for this opportunity to participate today. Thank you, sir.
Sir, back to you. We're complete.
Okay, thanks, General Terry, General McGee, and all the panelists for a wonderful discussion of, as Brigadier Ashurst reminded us, setting the region, right? So that's a good way to think. After a great sustainment conversation, time now for a little personal sustainment. Refreshments are set out in the reception area. Please be back at 10:30. Check your membership status during the break, please. Thanks, Charles. Thank you very much. Good job.